To quote my late great friend and colleague Richard Dotty, aka the Mogambo Guru, we're all freaking doomed. This is usaspending.gov. I just ran across this recently. It says find an agency profile. So these are all the government agencies, and there are about 108 of them here. It's huge. Some of them are silly little things with ridiculous names. Some of them, though, the biggies, the big culprits. And I say culprits because remember, this is all the expenditures are done through what is basically robbery. Government doesn't create anything. It has to steal whatever it's going to spend from somebody else before it spends it. When I say steal, it sounds like fairly harsh words, but how much of it? I mean, I would voluntarily pay a certain amount of taxes if it sounded like a good idea. When you look at where our taxes are being spent and all of this nightmare web of government agencies and expenditures and everybody, if you don't spend everything if you don't spend your entire budget and then a little bit more, the next year your department gets cut back. So the goal of every single department is to spend more than their income. This is one of the big problems with the way government is set up. It encourages very perverse outcomes. So we've got the Department of the Treasury for 26% roughly, Health and Human Services, 23% of the expenditures, the Department of Defense, 15.2%, Social Security Administration, 10%, and then it goes down from there. But here's the cool thing. You can drill down into these, and it calculates some stuff for a second, and then you can see how that politicians have gone insane. And we keep on voting for this stuff. And one of the problems is, I believe it was Dan Larimer that said there should be no representation without net taxation. The U.S., the Revolutionary War, was fought over no taxation without representation. But what Dan is saying is you shouldn't be able to vote, you shouldn't have representation unless you are actually paying your own way through society. If you're living off of the charity of others, the forced charity of others, you should not be able to vote for a politician to steal more from those others that you are living off of. Because at that point, we are freaking doomed. And look at what is happening. In 2018, the Treasury's total budget was $1.4 trillion. Today, it is 3.3. So it's more than doubled since 2018. Now, it was growing at a reasonable rate up until the pandemic year. Once we went through the pandemic plunge, the COVID crash, this just exploded to all-time highs. And now politicians seem to think that this is normal and this is okay and that they can do this without destroying the entire world economy. Well, guess what? They can't. This is a very dangerous thing they're doing. If you scroll down, you'll discover that you can drill down into different sectors, different offices and stuff, and you find that there's all of these, within a department, there's all these different sub-departments, and there's state offices, and this is the reason no government agency can be as efficient as the private sector. Private business is so much more efficient because they've got to compete against one another. This is a giant monopoly that is encouraged to spend as much as it can, spend more than it has, so that next year they get a budget increase. And so much of this gets wasted. This is the reason government is not the answer. You pay $1 in this end in taxes, and then it has to go through all of these departments, and everybody sitting behind a desk has to get a cut, and then it comes out the other end, and some school teacher gets paid 50 cents out of that $1 that you paid in taxes. So you can keep on drilling down in all of these. It's very interesting. Social Security, it looks like one big thing, but then here you've got federal disability insurance. Now, when I make a graph of this on the Federal Reserve, it's really interesting how more and more people, the total number of people that keep on injuring themselves over time, the people that can't work and they're on assistance because they're disabled, keeps on going up. And then whenever we have a recession or there's layoffs or some crisis, there's this big spike in people that suddenly hurt themselves and can no longer work. It's very, very interesting to see all of this. But, where are they getting, when you look at all of these departments, the Defense Department, here you have 1.26 trillion, 1.25 trillion, 1.278 trillion, and then in just the past couple of years, 1.5, 1.94. If you go to the Health and Human Services, look at how this has exploded from 1.757 up to 2.926. So all of them are on this crazy trajectory where it's like suddenly the government found a whole bunch of currency. It just like magically appeared. 1.4, 1.44, 2.389, 2.730, and 3.295. So you're at 3.3 trillion from 1.4. So where did all of this come from? Well, let's take a look at, here's the federal government current tax receipts. So this income for the government only comes from taxes, and it is at 3.2. So this is the federal government at $3.2 trillion. So that's current tax receipts. If we go to total federal receipts, that's at 4.294. However, I've annualized this. When you bring up the graph, this is what it looks like, but it's so noisy. You have to sum it, and here's semi-annual, and then annual. And so this is total federal receipts, but when they annualize it, it comes out different. Instead of 4.294 or 4.3, I will round, it's 4.9 actually, rounding. So federal receipts. Here's federal government current receipts is at 5 trillion. Now, I don't have the time nor the inclination to track all of this down. Below each graph, it tells you that you can go to this link, and somewhere, when you go to that link, it isn't explained there. You have to dig down, go through a whole bunch of different reports and so on, and find what the definition of this is and why federal government current tax receipts are 3.2, federal government receipts are 4.3 or 4.9, or if they're current receipts, they're 5 trillion. Then if it's government current tax receipts, that's 5.47 trillion. Now, state and local is another 2.265 trillion on top of all this, giving government current receipts 7.633, actually 7.634 trillion, rounding, or government total receipts 7.775 trillion. This is insane. Now, I want you to look at the tail end of each one of these, this sudden increase that has happened after the pandemic. All these new taxes came in, and it is 50. We went from 2 trillion to 3.2 trillion. So this it's up by more than 50%. From 2 to 3 is 50%. And so are you being paid 50% more so that you're paying 50% more tax? 90% of the people are not getting paid 50% more than they were in 2019. Where did this come from? Did the economy grow by 50% since 2019? No, that didn't happen either. So where did all of this come from? So that was the current tax receipts. There you see it again, this sudden spike since the pandemic plunge, the COVID crash. There you see it again. and again and again. Now, state and local doesn't show it as much, but it's still there. And again and again, it's like there's suddenly this flood of taxes coming to the government. Where did that come from? Well, this is demand deposits. So these are checking accounts, and this is for individuals and businesses. So these are, 1 trillion, 2 trillion, 3 trillion. And so, back in 2008, about 300 billion roughly, and it bounces up and down. And then we're up here at about 1.5 trillion before the pandemic plunge, the COVID crash. And here we are at 5.364, almost 5.4 trillion. That's 5.3 trillion from 1.5 trillion. So this is more than 3 times what it was before. Now, where could all of that come from? Could it be that some of the, as the Federal Reserve just pumped all of this cash into the stock markets by buying assets, buying bonds, buying mortgage-backed securities through open market operations, which means they're buying them through one of their primary dealers, the primary dealer like Goldman Sachs or Bank of America Securities or JP Morgan Chase Securities, the brokerage division of these big banks that is a primary dealer, the only ones that the Federal Reserve can buy through, goes and buys these out of the market, sells them to the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve creates brand new currency that is used to pay for it. So it goes directly into the financial system. And then they also lower interest rates. Could this be some people cashing out of the stock market and they owe taxes on that? If so, now the stock markets are crashing. Since the beginning of 2002, stock markets have been going down. Now there's going to be some people that are still selling. That's the reason the stock markets are going down. But how long does this extra income last when the government is spending it like drunken sailors? It's eventually this excess tax revenue. Now, I don't know if the Treasury Department is taxing all of the handouts that the Fed created currency, Treasury wrote a check and sent them to everybody. Is that taxable income? I'm not sure. I'm not going to bother tracking that down. No. Now, I just know that we are freaking doomed, and this is the reason, because the government is meddling with all of this. So here's total government receipts as a percentage of GDP. And, it used to be 22% back in the, after World War II, and it ramped up, and about 28% seems like about the maximum amount of the economy that the government can take from us, run through their bureaucratic system, and everybody gets their cut, and then they respend some of that back into the economy. Some people argue it's good for the economy. The math doesn't work out. It doesn't support their position that it's good for the economy. And so this, where it hit 30%, this was all of the tax revenues flooding in during the Clinton administration from the NASDAQ boom. But then you can see about 28 to 29% is like the maximum that they can take out of the economy before they break something. Federal net outlays, how much are they spending as a percentage of GDP? And so this is federal, not total government. The last graph was total government outlays. But you can see the federal outlays used to be 3% of the economy. 3%. And then we've got the Great Depression here, and it goes up to 8-9%. That was World War II, so fighting for our lives, basically. And then sort of a very nice stable period through the 60s and stuff of about 16-17%. They get up to 20%. And now we are up at 31%. This is going to drag down the world economy. This is not going to spending 30% of, they have to steal that, and they steal it either through taxation or some direct revenue source, or they steal it through inflation. And so when they create new currency, it inflates the currency supply. So back to demand deposits. A lot of this was created, a lot of it was wealth that had grown in the stock markets and in real estate, and people cashing out, and that's sitting there, and that's like a battery that will someday get spent into the economy and reach some equilibrium where if I divided this by GDP, you'd see that there's an equilibrium with the economy where people feel like when they've got a certain number of months of living expenses or whatever in their checking account, they feel safe and it feels balanced. Well, right now, people are scared, and so a lot of this stays in, but this is like a battery. The Federal Reserve created all of this currency. Now they're blaming everything else on inflation instead of themselves, and they're going to try to get ahead of inflation by putting you out of business, putting you out of a job. They're going to slow down spending by crushing the economy when all of this is still sitting there. And it's like a battery when it's in savings. You've got a circuit that is the economy, and you've got goods and services and prices, and then you've got savings over here, and you've got a dollar doing the velocity thing, circulating. How many times does that dollar circulate in a year? When it's stuck in a checking account or a savings account, the velocity is zero at that point. So all of this has zero velocity. So the Fed can crush the economy. This could still come out if people start feeling good, if the economy ever feels like it's coming back again, then this starts leaking out, and eventually prices have to seek a level that accounts for all of this currency. So we're back to outlays as a percentage of gross domestic product, but here's outlays on just the interest, and this is what's happening. So this is because of raising rates recently. This is just because of deficit spending, because I mean they did try raising rates before the pandemic, and then there was a financial crisis in the repo markets, a banking crisis, a liquidity crisis, and so they took rates down again. But now they're raising rates again, and so there is a dead end to this somewhere. And so the government is set to spend more on debt payments than the entire national defense budget. Now, how can they keep us in this system and suck us down into this vortex of poverty, which if we can't get out of this predicament that we are in, and this is a predicament, it's not a problem. Problems have a solution. Predicaments have a set of bad choices that you have to choose from. So India rolls out its central bank digital currency. So this is coming very rapidly. Once they get everybody using a digital currency and there isn't any more cash, then we're really stuck in the system until people start using other currencies, simply like in a place like Venezuela, where they're searching for an alternative than the central bank currency. And here is Russia to use digital ruble in settlements with China. This is old, from more than a month ago, but the point is we are coming near the end of the death of the global dollar standard. As the U.S. dollar loses its world reserve currency status, it means that our standard of living has to go way down. Now, for some reason, the dollar is rising, and people all over the world have to scrape up dollars to pay dollar-denominated debt. If they borrowed in dollars, a lot of countries did this, they have to scrape up dollars, and the dollars are now much more expensive measured in their currency. Also, anything priced in dollars, like oil, has to be paid for. They have to acquire those dollars to pay for those things. And as they do, that drives the dollar up further because of the demand for dollars and causes the pain around the world to be even greater. We are reaching a focal point of all of these different problems converging simultaneously. This is pretty scary, what is happening in the world right now, and everybody needs to defend themselves against this. And still, after all these years, the best insurance that I can think of is precious metals. And that is what I've been doing since gold was $315 an ounce back in 2002. It's been the best investment I've made. The gold that I bought back then returned far more than the S&P 500 or stocks, about triple. So I want to thank you for watching. We'll see you next time, and good luck. At GoldSilver.com, we have a price match guarantee, free shipping, and global storage options. Learn more about how to invest in precious metals at GoldSilver.com.